So if you've ever wound up on my channel, you may be aware we've been going through early Spider-Man and X-Men issues. Out of these, I am loving almost all of the Spider-Man issues, whereas the X-Men, they kind of fall a little bit flat. And I mean, I knew this going in. The 60s era X-Men aren't well regarded, and the book doesn't really pick up until its reboot in 1975 with giant-sized X-Men 1. My goal is generally to do 3 issues a week. I think I'm going to bump that up with the X-Men and do more issues, but breeze through them on the channel until we get to that 1975 issue. We got some important lore with McWheels and the 5 X-Men, an introduction to Magneto and the Evil Brotherhood, but really there's not much happening, and more importantly, not a lot of lore is being developed, which is part of the reason for this channel. So I guess moving forward, I'll be skipping over a lot of the details in those early X-Men issues, as they are very villain of the week and very repetitive. But the stark disparity between the 2 books is both blatantly obvious and a massively widening gap as these issues progress. So I thought this deserved a look into. Now, I mock this era's comics quite a lot. To be fair, I mock a lot of things. I use words like corny, cliche, the villain's motives are basic, the story tells us, not shows us. It's not a bad thing, it's just the way things work back then. But here's the thing. Spider-Man quickly became one of the biggest selling superheroes of all time. And there's a few obvious reasons for this. The teenage superhero rather than sidekick, his unique powers, and equally being focused on Peter Parker as much as Spider-Man. Whereas the X-Men, despite their current success and popularity, didn't do well in that era, and I think it comes down to one thing. The Spider-Man comics, well, they work. Okay, so maybe that's cheating to say one thing and then give something so broad as that, but it really does sum it up from a reading experience. It feels much better. But don't worry, we'll go into a little bit more detail later, but I think it's important to note that without any breakdown or any analysis, the Spider-Man books just feel better once you finish them. Now, despite all those issues regarding early comics that I mentioned, the Spider-Man early issues are still an enjoyable read, and they still add value to Peter Parker's overall story. Yes, the early X-Men issues develop a lot of lore, but it's mostly in the first 4 or 5 books. But other than world building, they really don't stand out. If I try to remove myself from the overall X-Men fan bigger picture and remove any bias against the exposition-y, corny writing style of the time, there are still some major fundamental flaws in the storytelling itself that potentially almost prevented the X-Men from becoming what they are today. The heroes all seem like characters of themselves. McWheels is the father figure, Cyclops the Boy Scout, Bobby the funny one, Hank the smart one, Jean is simply just the token girl character. They all seem to be cardboard cutouts of their future selves. Looking at it subjectively, if these issues weren't related to the future X-Men we would all know and love, I wouldn't find much incentive to keep on reading. I think one of the main downfalls is the ensemble cast. So much of it is spent trying to show each aspect of every character in every issue that there's no room for individuals to grow. In fact, there is very little growth at all, but Marvel would get a better balance much later. Claremont's run would balance the new team out, and they knew how not to overcrowd each book. And when the cast finally grew, they split into 2 books for the blue and gold teams to give that space. The same can be said for the New Mutants and the Generation X books that both organically grew their teams and balanced the teenage aspects with both their physical and emotional dilemmas quite well. I would have to go back and do a reread, but I don't think Marvel have really hit their stride with another Teenage X team since the new X-Men. I know I was less enthused with the whole Generation Hope book, but there's been so many so it's hard to keep up. Anyway, when we meet the first original 5 X-Men students, they're already competent, well-trained and ready to take on the world. Sure, the action's great, but if there's no one there you overly care about, what does it matter? The books are also exposition and dialogue heavy. I noticed this when cropping out the panels for the videos. Sometimes the speech bubbles take up a ridiculous amount of room. The issues are also very plot driven, and like the story is told like a 4-year-old. Well, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Another big issue is the resolution of many of the comics, and I've said this so many times in the videos because it keeps happening, but there's way too many times when Mick Wheels is stepping in at the last moment to save the day, and it really takes the impact away from the story. Now, Spider-Man, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. You have a lone, central character that is thrown into a situation that forces him to grow and learn, both as a person and as a hero. All his wins are obtained by his hand, whether it be by strength, skills, brains, whatever. And we spend a lot more time with Peter Parker. We get to know him and we get to feel for him, even if the drama is a little bit soap opera-y at times. I'm looking at you, Betty. If you haven't seen my video about issue 18 of The Amazing Spider-Man, click somewhere around here, but it's an issue that follows Peter's life, his issue with his Aunt May's health, his relationship with Betty, and the weight of Spider-Man in his life. There's very little action in it, and it's probably the best issue from that era that I've read. Now, I'm not throwing shade at the X-Men, I'm reviewing them for a reason. But I understand why the X-Men almost faded into nothingness only to re-emerge with a completely new cast in Giant Size X-Men 1, and why Spider-Man went on to become the flagship character for Marvel. And looking back, Marvel must have had the confidence in the X-Men. Either that or they were simply using the 60s era as a platform and wanting to reunite a completely new team. But I think it's more like they viewed the potential of the X-Men world, the potential for anyone to have powers, the comparison to the civil rights movements and the whole racist metaphors, the law. The structure was there to create something better. It just needed the correct execution and storytelling. On another note, that's kind of why I did this channel, to allow those that wanted the full lore and history of certain comics without having to go back and potentially be turned off from reading those early issues. I did a full read through years ago and I wanted to start again, but was faced with that same dilemma of going all the way back to the beginning. Like, it's time consuming to read that many issues, like really time consuming. On one hand, however, doing these videos has really forced me to slow down the reading and not get caught up too much in the Marvel world again. While on the other hand, it slowed me down and I have to resist not trying to read ahead too much, otherwise I'll forget what the issue is about. And these videos really do take a ton of time compared to the simple time it would simply take me to read a comic or two. Anyway, I found that I enjoyed this channel, so hopefully you enjoy it too. I just hope everyone's happy if I rush through some of the X-Men issues and it's not going to annoy anybody too much. But other than that, happy reading and I'll see you with the next video.